You may have seen the video describing the process behind the inspiration and sculpting of the Dick Hathaway memorial sculpture. This video is the journey of creating the sculpture into bronze and preparing it for delivery. The sculpture was created by sculptor Bridgette, an alumni of Vermont College where Dick Hathaway was a professor. It is understood that Dick never would have thought of having a sculpture made of him. The artist hoped that by creating a sculpture of this humble man, when others would see it they would ask, who was he? Why did they do this? And in the answer to those questions, they would learn about history, giving, education, and friendship, and so much more. The sculptor donated her time to the project, and the people of Montpelier, friends, family, and many others, donated the remaining funds to cast him. The date of the unveiling of the Dick Hathaway memorial sculpture is Thursday, September 25th, 2008 at 5:30 p.m. Along with the unveiling, a small memorial service is planned. All are welcome to attend. You have seen the process of sculpting the professor in the previous video. There are still some funds needed to bring Dick Hathaway home from Texas to the Green Mountain State where he will reside. Donations will be taken through the T.W. Wood Gallery. After putting in the final details of the sculpting and making sure that everything is exactly how the artist sees it, the sculptor and her apprentice, Russo, an exchange student from Georgia, begin the arduous process of cutting the sculpture. It is quite macabre for some to watch, as cuts are made through the clay, foam, and rebar with a reciprocating saw. Every bronze created in the artist's studio goes through this process, and it's no different for the professor's memorial. The separate sections make it much easier to make a mold and for casting. Russo has never experienced this before, and Bridgette laughs at her expressions through the process. Upon completion, they have separated Dick into many pieces: left arm, right elbow, head, upper torso, lower torso, knees, right leg, and left leg. There is also a satchel that will sit at Dick's feet that holds a message from all of Dick's friends, colleagues, and students. Most artists, upon completion of a sculpture, will send it to the Foundry for the mold and the casting process. The Foundry would charge approximately $7,000 for creating a mold of this size. By creating the mold in her studio, the artist is able to donate more to the project. The mold-making process is laborious and will probably take Bridgette and Russo a week of very full work days. Once the sculpted pieces are cut apart, each must be prepared. 2-part molds will be made. Seams must be created to divide the sections again, usually in half. Bridgette sculpted Dick with his real glasses. The ear portion of the glasses is trapped under his hair. The family has given permission to keep the glasses, and the ear portion is cut off to facilitate in the mold-making process. A mold has already been made of the glasses, and the original glasses will be replaced with wax glasses at another stage. Each one of the cut sections is laid on a bed of clay that is warmed up in a microwave. Before the clay hardens, the artist clays up and creates seams around the entire section, being sure to leave an area that will be used to pour the wax into. A channel is carved into the white clay. The channel acts as a key to keep the 2 halves of rubber from misaligning later when the foundry pours the waxes. The upper torso seams are created differently. Here, thin metal is pushed into the sculpted clay. The advantages to this process is that rubber can be painted over the entire piece instead of coating 2 halves separately. It does save some time, but the disadvantages are that the piece may not align as easily when putting the mold back together and pouring the waxes. Each of the sections is then sprayed with the mold release agent before the rubber is applied. The rubber is a 2-part process. Mix part A with part B at equal ratios. Russo mixes cup after cup, prompting the artist more, while the sculptor painstakingly paints the rubber on each piece. The first coat of rubber is very important. It is here that the detail is held. Once the coats of rubber are thick, usually about 3 coats, the sculptor must check to be sure that the mother mold will be able to be removed from the rubber. She prepares the rubber for the next step. A mother mold is called this because it holds the rubber in place when the wax is poured. These mother molds are going to be made of plaster, a very messy job. Plaster is mixed by hand and then dripped over each rubber section. This is not a bird's nest on Dick's face, but it is hemp that is added to the plaster for strength. Once the molds are completed, they must be separated. The clay can be reused on the next sculpture. Seeing a pile of clay body parts in the corner of the sculptor's studio is not an unusual sight. This clay won't be recycled, however, until the process is complete. Having the original art nearby sometimes comes in handy when the waxes are cleaned and you need to check out how it was originally sculpted. The wax is the next step in the process. After the molds are cleaned and reassembled, they are taken to the foundry. And Russo and the sculptor spend a long 2 days cleaning the studio. At the foundry, they pour wax into each mold piece, creating a very thin wax shell. This wax retains all of the detail of the original sculpture, if the molds were created successfully. The waxes are brought back to the artist's studio, and more body parts are cleaned and detailed. Here you can see the wax glasses added to the wax head of Richard Hathaway. Each wax piece must be checked to make sure that they go together as they should. It is much easier to adjust a wax before pouring than it is to adjust a piece of metal after pouring. The foundry takes over from here, adding pour cups and sprues to each of the many wax pieces. They have cut up the sculpture even further, and you have to wonder how they can put everything together and not sacrifice the integrity of the art. But they do, and the artist trusts them and monitors the process all the way. The sprues, which are just long wax rods, make a way for gas to escape when pouring the metal, and the cups will be what the metal is poured through. Once gated or sprued up, the wax enter the slurry room, where they go through a long process of dipping into a solution and then having a sand mixture put over them. Many coats are needed, and each piece is coated both inside and out to create a shell. The day the artist receives the call to say, "We're pouring," she is elated. She has documented this entire process on an online blog dedicated to the professor. The first entry was May 3rd, 2006. It has been over 2 years since the beginning of this project. Most commissions don't take this long, but because they have had to raise money, the project has lingered, and the artist is excited to finally see Dick in bronze. The lost wax method of bronze casting is very similar to the ancient process. While ingots are heated in the foundry crucible, the wax that was gated up and now has shells around them is put into a very hot oven. The oven melts the wax or burns out the wax from these shells. Thus the name, the lost wax method. Because the wax was coated both inside and out with a ceramic and then burned out, the wax is gone and a cavity now exists where the wax once was. This is the space where the bronze will be poured. The hot shells are put into a sand pit as a safety measure. The sand would catch any molten bronze should there be a mishap. The foundrymen carefully take the crucible with molten bronze and fill each of the shells. Watching a foundry pour is fascinating. There is something hypnotizing about that color. The pour actually does not take long, though these are not the only pieces of Dick Hathaway. At this pouring, there are other pieces in different parts of the foundry at different stages. And as the artist looks at the professor's head on a welding stand, she thinks of a quote Dick used to say, something that had to do with his thoughts on exercising. "My body is just something I use to carry around my head." Once the shells cool, the ceramic shell is broken off of them with a hammer. The foundry man then has to cut off each of the gates and weld the many pieces of Dick Hathaway back together again. It is at this moment that you begin to realize that the foundry deserves every cent they get for their work. Bronze casting is a long process. If you remember from the artist's first video that is on the Hathaway blog, there was a wooden bench that was made to create Dick Hathaway on. It is in proportion to the bench at Vermont College, where Dick will be placed. That bench is brought to the foundry for the foundrymen to use to put Dick together. Each piece is painstakingly welded together. It is difficult to see Dick in so many pieces, but slowly he will be put back together again. Texture is the trademark of Mongeon's sculptures, and the foundryman is an artist when it comes to matching those textures, as he seamlessly creates the bronze. It is just a month until Dick will be completed. Once the sculpture is put together, the artist will be called back into the foundry for approval. If there are any changes or modifications, they are done at that time. Then color is added. Metal bolts will be welded to his foot and his bottom. Threaded rods will be provided by the foundry. The rods will be threaded into the bolts and then secured to the bench in the ground when Dick is installed in Vermont. The scheduled date of the unveiling of the completed piece is Thursday, September 25th, 2008, outside of the T.W. Wood Gallery in Montpelier, Vermont, where Dick will forever sit beckoning to those who pass by and watching over the comings and the goings, the children playing and growing, students learning, and will be a part of Vermont's history. Please stay tuned for the next video, Dick's Travels and the Unveiling. It should be quite exciting. The artist would like to thank the many people who donated to the project, the T.W. Wood Gallery, Vermont College, and her apprentices. We'll see you in Vermont.